past several months, working with Jackie Dybel, we have assembled the transportation-related items for you for consideration here tonight. I will start off with the first topic of discussion. Staff has, over the years, spent a lot of time with requests from public subdivisions wanting to go private and private subdivisions wanting to go public. These typically require a lot of staff time and staff effort coordinating with the specifics of the details of the specific subdivision. Each one is different. One issue we wanted to bring to you tonight was related to the size of subdivisions. For your consideration moving forward, we don't consider this an urgent issue because thankfully for the most recent applications, we've been requiring all private subdivisions to be designed to public standards. So ultimately this issue, if we do our job properly, will be going away. The issue of concern for us and for staff is that small subdivisions, I'm just going to throw out a number, let's say subdivisions under 20 units, typically aren't large enough to fund their own maintenance requests. So there are exceptions. We had one ask to go from public to private several months ago that was approved by you and did show that financial capability to maintain their own infrastructure. But typically there's a sweet spot of, we would say, let's say 15, 20, 25, a number of units where it's not sustainable for them to be self-sufficient and be private. And we would typically want to steer them towards a more public approach in platting and getting their subdivision approved.
So if we did this, if they want it, would there still be a route for them to come in and ask for to go private?
One thing we've been considering as far as our plan review process and working through the final plat, we actually just spoke about this last week with the Deputy Director of Community Development and with Planning and Zoning Director. We're considering adding notes to final plat approvals, basically advising a property owner and a future purchaser of any home in these subdivisions, warning them that this is a private subdivision and they are responsible for their infrastructure when they purchase and in perpetuity. We strongly feel that when a developer chooses to go private, they normally choose that for a reason, that there's something either financial in their benefit or there's something that they can provide in the subdivision to increase the property values. There's usually something financial that is steering them in that direction. And we want to make sure that in the final plat, we are providing that notice to either the initial purchasers of those homes or future purchasers of those homes. Yes.
So I kind of like where you were going with that, because I'd say my hesitation is I do want to give homeowners and just different individuals, developers, et cetera, having the right to really gated private ways if that's their interest. But at the same time, due to the concerns you've seen and that we've all seen, I would like to see how we can better document and better disclose kind of the long-term needs around that. Because I guess my thought process is the city has to take care of all the public roads. So therefore, if someone's going to build a road that they actually are initially saying they don't want the city to take care of, I think that could be beneficial and not something I want to outlaw. But at the same time, I think we definitely need to have better disclosures around what that takes and the choice that was made, et cetera.
From a staff perspective, I don't think we were advocating, and we talked about this with legal extensively, I don't think we're going to be proposing a hard number in below X number, you are not allowed to go private. That's not our intention. We just wanted to raise the issue with you and explain that we are likely going to be moving in the direction of that final plat note that we had just talked about.
Excellent.
Yes.
I guess I would just question, I mean, what other cities are doing and what you're seeing as far as taking away that right to have a private street. I mean, I could see in some ways where having a gated community would be, beneficial and there would be some advantage, but could you at least require them to build the streets to city codes and standards so that if at some time they did become public, they would be acceptable?
For the past, I'm struggling with a number. I'm looking at Steve, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years. We have been doing exactly that.
Right.
Sometimes the issue in the requests to go from private to public is not just necessarily the asphalt thickness. It's beyond the asphalt. It's the curb. It's the right-of-way width. It's the offset to the fronts of the units. It's the approach of how the driveway was constructed and whether it accommodates a sidewalk. There's a lot of other elements of difficulty that go into those requests.
I mean, can all those be considered? I mean, I would assume that they are anyway. I mean, they would be if it was a public street. So could you just make them, like all streets meet the same conditions?
We have been to the extent that we're able to, yes, we've been doing that as a staff, and that's been our process recently. The difficulty that the pictures you see up on the board, Jackie would probably be able to know the details. I'm pretty sure these were either built not. No. There is
Jackie.
There can be an issue where it was created in Fulton County and annexed in. There is also an issue where it was built 20 years ago before staff has been as meticulous as we are as making sure that it's built to our public code.
So Walnut Terrace was annexed in as part of the Fulton County Cottages Crabapple. However, Saddle Creek was done in Roswell in the 70s. Now, part of it may have been annexed in the 70s, and this could have been there at that time, but Saddle Creek's been in Roswell since at least the 70s. So I'm not sure if Hope Vine was annexed or not, but Walnut Terrace was definitely annexed in.
Hope Vine is on the northern end of Saddle Creek. Wanted me to pull up a map, I could show you. It's small, you can see, actually. Saddle Creek is all this area. Here's Hope Vine.
Bless you.
This area and this area, right next to the tennis courts.
10 homes here on that side.
So how are you going to come up with that number?
We wanted to see if that's a process that you wanted to go down. Ultimately, our recommendation is to handle it with a note and final plat. We think that due to these specifics of what we've seen over the years, especially with comparing, say, Hope Vine to Balmoral, we think there has been cases recently where a subdivision of 15 is financially capable of maintaining their own infrastructure, and it would be very difficult for staff to pin that number down and say, below 20 you can't, above 20 is fine, or below 30 you can't, above 30 is fine. We're confident in what we've been doing recently. All subdivisions, public or private, must meet public standards, and the note on the final plat that we will start adding.
Okay.
Next topic, alleys. This is not a picture in Roswell, but it helps drive home the point that we're wanting to show you. Alleys are a hot topic right now for us. I'll be showing you the actual language in the code on the next slide. This is a picture in Woodstock, and what you're seeing here, if you can follow my cursor, this is a public street, and this is an alley. Per our current UDC, we require alley as only a secondary access for homes. So therefore, in our UDC for this map, these homes would be allowed because they front a public road and have alley as secondary access. These homes would not because they only front an alley. What I've shown you is our current code. We are asking to update the definition of alley in our code with the new text in red. Current text says the alley is a public or private thoroughfare which affords only a secondary means of access to abutting property. What we would like to add is the sentence behind it, that alleys cannot serve as the only means of access.
So if you go back to that picture a second, the ones on the right that you said wouldn't qualify, that have the alley on one side, what if there was another alley on the other side?
No.
So there has to be a public street on one side.
Yes.
It's a fire access issue, so we would, in a situation where you had a unit between two alleys, we would need one of those alleys to withstand public safety access. And typically, the reason why developers ask for alleys is they want that narrowness and they want the ability to confine that space, and they typically wouldn't provide fire access on an alley.
How wide is an alley?
Do you remember?
16 feet and 20 feet. So we have two different sections of it for in the code.
And then
How wide's
it's
the
a
lane,
street,
though?
The lane is the 16. So,
No, lane, it would be 8 feet,
no, it's
8 feet on each side.
I might have a picture. Yeah, I don't.
And a standard street must be how wide?
Typically, a standard street is 50 feet of right-of-way, so it's 2 lanes of pavement and shoulders sidewalk.
And what I'm getting at is if you've got with the mirrors out at 10 to 10 and a half foot wide fire truck going down a one way on a street, if there's a car parked on the other side of the alley and there's 2 lanes on that street, how wide's the lane on the one side of this?
the travel lane for the fire service route minimum is 20 feet for fire. Travel lane without that is 16. So that's the minimum.
what minimum is what?
For the fire service route, to include for fire, is the minimum of 20 feet.
In an alley 16?
So based on your question before, if
Could be.
Jackie can tell me if I'm wrong, if one of the 2 alleys were at least 20 feet wide, then it would provide sufficient for fire.
Well, not based on our definition.
Okay.
Our definition says a primary, a public or private thoroughfare, so, for a primary road. So you have to look at the definition of road and alley. What we are trying to deal with here is, we get a lot of people who are trying to put in just little small roadways, and they're fronting on, the grass or the courtyards and things like that. And we've been telling them no, but we're trying to strengthen the definition of the alley. So to clearly say it cannot serve as the only means of access. Yes, it says that now, and we've been dealing with that, but if we put this in, it just gives it a little bit more of a definition so that you have to have, and I know it's more impervious surface, because technically that's what it would be. Yes, but you have to have the main road to meet the 26 feet roadway width so that you have standards for roads and you standards for fire. The alley would be the smaller portion in the back that allows the people to do front-loaded townhomes, but or rear-loaded, so you'd have the rear coming in from the alley. And some people want to do that. That's the new design for townhomes where you don't see the garage in the front. That's really why people are building the alleys. I don't know if that answers what you were looking for.
So to be clear, so I agree with everything you're saying. I think that all makes sense. I support this request. The way I see it, it's not changing anything. It's really just clarifying.
It's actually making it stronger.
We're seeing many requests that aren't meeting the original text in gray, and we're adding another sentence to hopefully clarify it to the applicant.
So with
Are
this,
or are not meeting?
We have seen, Jackie,
Requests.
we are
tell them no.
we are seeing more and more frequent requests over time that are violating the statement in gray. And we want to add the sentence in red to further enforce what we what we think the rule is.
So this sentence would not change how you are implementing this rule already.
Correct.
It would
just
not.
strengthen it. It would not change.
It would just give clarification.
Yes.
It will hopefully provide the developers enough guidance that they won't be showing it or asking for it on the onset.
That's all that is.
Fine with it.
Seems pretty clear to me.
Next, this will take a little bit of time. We would like to talk about changes to the street types, and I've got about 10 slides to page through here. I'll do that in a second. The primary motivation for these changes, we are asking to eliminate 2 street types. I'll show you those in a second. They are roads that we have not seen being used typically since the UDC is proposed, and staff feels that we can delete them without any repercussions. We also have talked a lot about, over the past year with Councilmember Palermo, the issue of 5-foot sidewalks and widening sidewalks and accommodating multiple users and talking about multi-use trails. And you'll see in street types moving forward that we have many instances of 6-foot sidewalks. From staff's perspective, sidewalks are a difficult element to ask a developer to comply with, especially when it's a single-family home, and there's no sidewalk on either side of them. Every foot that sidewalk is wider is a more difficult sell for us as staff. Functionally, for us, we have many 4-foot existing sidewalks in this city. We have many 5-foot existing sidewalks in this city. We can fully support the increase width from a 4-foot sidewalk to a 5-foot sidewalk because 5-foot sidewalks accommodate ADA and all users. It is much more difficult for us to generate the need and require an upgrade from a 5-foot sidewalk, which already meets ADA, to a 6-foot sidewalk that provides no additional benefits to the user. It also isn't quite to the width of a multi-use trail that allows other modes of travel. It's just that extra feet of width. And what you'll see moving forward is a lot of these changes are taking a 6-foot request on a section and moving that down to 5-foot, and taking a 5-foot bike lane, which under the same aspect, 4-foot bike lanes are a best practice. 4-foot bike lanes are fantastic, and I wish we had more in the city, but 4-foot bike lanes is really all we need. 5-foot bike lanes, we're not sure why they were even in here and don't provide a lot of benefit or any additional safety to the users moving forward. First section here we have called local street residential, no change there. I'm going to go through all of them if I can, and then we'll ask for questions when we're done. Next is the residential that we were asking to delete. The primary reason we haven't seen this being used very much, and staff was unsure of the purpose to begin with. If you'll notice, the width of the pavement is pretty significant. So we were talking about 2 9-foot travel lanes with 2 areas for on-street parking. That would be 32 feet of pavement between the curbs. That is very wide for a residential area. That can encourage speeding, that can encourage some safety issues, and ultimately that's why we proposed eliminating it. This is the second road type we asked to delete. Ultimately, this picture isn't in the UDC, but this is an example of what it is. It's a Dutch term. It's called a woonerf. It was included in text, referenced in text in the UDC. It has never been asked for, to my knowledge, and we're asking to just strike it from the document. This graphic, if you'll notice, the element D and then element H are reduced from 6 to 5 and 5 to 4, and then those widths are carried back up to the sum in value A and value B. Next graphic is the exact same thing. We're actually taking G and we're taking it from 8 feet to 9 feet, which is the standard, and then we're taking that number and back calculating back up to A and B. Next graphic, we are taking C sidewalk down from 6 down to 5. a Jeep bike lane from 6 down to 4, and then carrying the math up into width A and B. Next graphic, we are taking the sidewalk from 6 to 5 and the bike lane from 6 to 4, and then we're carrying the math back up forward into the width above. Next graphic, we are taking the sidewalk, which is currently 6 to 10, and we are editing to 5 to 10. We're taking the bike lane from 6 feet to 4 feet, and we're taking those widths and calculating back up to the widths of A and B. The next graphic, we are taking this section for sidewalk from 6 feet to 5 feet, and then we are taking that math and back calculating up into the width A. Next graphic, we are taking the D sidewalk value from 6 feet to 5 feet. We're taking that math and calculating, carrying it through up into the width A. Here, there are no changes to C pedestrian passage. For D multi-use trail, we are asking to take the paved area travel way in the UDC where we have values for desirable, adequate, and minimum. It's nice to think that sometimes the developers will propose what we call as desirable, but in actuality, that pretty much never happens. So we would like to instead of providing a maximum desirable, an adequate, and a minimum standard, we would just like to provide one value, and that's 10 feet. This is the graphic for a service road. We would like to delete this. We have not seen this used by an applicant. We're unsure why it was included in the first place, and we're pretty confident that it can be deleted. That is the last street type that we'd like to pose for discussion.
Go back, I think it was one, no, keep going, go forward, I'm sorry, forward. Keep going. One more.
This was the last one.
We don't want to get rid of that.
Where was oh, it's a pedestrian passage, okay, sorry. I didn't see that part. Looked like an alley.
So I see a number of these things that are a great gift to developers, but in order to give the gift to the developers, it's, I believe, taking from residents and taking from infrastructure, and I am very opposed to many, pretty much this proposal.
So, what percentage of streets are we looking at in these ones we're changing here, would you say, that we deal with on a daily basis?
If we're talking about every street type we just showed you, and we're talking about some of the changes from 6 to 5 and from 6 to 4, that is a very common occurrence that we're seeing in plan review.
So I guess I'd like to see a little more where these are, the different types of streets that we would be changing.
Would you like to see some recent examples
Yes.
of where these issues have come up during plan review?
Absolutely.
Specific sites, specific addresses,
Yeah,
and
'cause-
the challenges that we've.
Yeah, not necessarily, I mean, I don't think everything's a gift to a developer. I think, there's functional situations where things make sense. So I'd like to look at where things make sense and examples of those so I can see.
Would you like me to show you one offhand that I just?
Sure.
Mohammed, southeast corner of 9 and Holcomb Bridge. That was existing 5 that code would have made 6, right?
Actually, it'll go to 8.
Okay.
Holcomb Bridge at 9.
Yeah.
It'll go
That's-
to 8.
That's different because we, special there.
Yes.
So that,
Let's pretend that we didn't give them something special. There could be a scenario where I can't jump to the other side of the road here. It's not cooperating. This is fairly new sidewalk, and whatever, Google Maps is not cooperating. Let us work with Jackie and provide you a couple of recent examples of where the toughest part for staff is when they have existing 5 feet. And per code, we ask them to rip out the 5 feet and put in 6 feet.
I'd like to understand a little bit more guess, utility of changing these and why and where and what it matches up to. You know, obviously, if you got 5 feet going to 6 feet, you're tearing it up, and it's going to 6 feet and 5 feet. And so for me, I think a little bit more of the practicum of what's happening will help me understand it a little bit better.
Mohammed and I will take a look at what's come through in the past 6 months to 12 months and try and explain why this has been difficult.
And if you could include, when you do that, you know, a neighborhood or a townhome kind of development, one of the concerns that I'd like to understand is, we put all the requirements in. We hear a lot about clear cutting, right? And I wonder how much of that we have driven because of all the different requirements. So is this one way to maybe have less of that destruction? Because you're changing all the values.
Okay.
So.
And then do any of these affect the design proposed for the historic gateway as this falls?
That section's been approved by you, and that section has been approved by GDOT. So the general rule is that it's difficult for cities to make states require, just like it's difficult for states to require federal to do something. We are working in conjunction with the state, and the sidewalks on Gateway are already 8 feet wide. So for hypothetically, you making a change to one of these UDC street types would not change the approved concept and the approved section for Gateway moving forward. We could handle that separately if you like, but nothing, the state DOT, if they were doing a project, is not required to meet your system UDC.
Yeah, I was just curious, since that's a project we've looked at pretty closely over the last few months, so I just wondered how it impacts this.
Along Gateway, for the top half, the northern half of the project, we have paved sidewalks on both sides, which is fully trail acceptable and provide access for all users. For the southern half of the project, we have a sidewalk on one side and a multi-use trail on the other side.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's all I have, unless there's any questions for staff. I can fit in next time. You're up.
Any additional questions?
Do you have any more? We'll bring it to
Well, that was pretty quick. Well, we're adjourned.
Put it where we can turn it
Okay, that's not a bad idea.
Our buttons won't go off.
Trying to dig out where we can't turn it on.
They got smart on us.
Hey, Marley, these not supposed to turn off now? Yeah, we need to switch that back.